Perek Beth Halacha Gimel, or Beth in some versions. Ulefi Hadvarim Ha'elu. So based on what we just explained, says Rambam, Ani mevaer kalolim gedolim mim'aseh ribon ha'olamim. I shall explain, I shall clarify, I shall explicate the some of the great actions or workings of Hashem, the master of the worlds, literally, Ribon Ha'olamim, Kadesh Yihiyu Petah Lamivin. And these brief comments, these remarks, these statements will serve as a preface, as an introduction, Lamivin. And that's an interesting thing that Rambam just wrote here. That what I'm about to write will be a Petah Lamivin. In other words, if you're not a Mevin, it won't help you. Which of course is true for many, many things. Kadesh, excuse me. Kadesh yiyu Petah Lamivin le'ahov et Hashem. Kol she'amaru Chachamim be'inyan ahava. As Chachamim themselves state in this regard, with regards to being aware of Hashem and increasing by such awareness, increasing one's love of Hashem and yearning for Hashem is perhaps a better term. Shemitoch kach ata makir et mi she'amar v'hayu ha'olam, which is a beautiful expression which Chazal used, that in the Sifrei, this statement appears, where it says, if you wish to know and come closer to Hashem, asok ba'agada, study literally the non-halachic aspects of the Torah, which includes midrashay hazal of various kinds, particularly they're referring there to the agadic kind of midrash as opposed to midrashay halacha. But of course, midrashay halacha themselves also include divrei agada, and occasionally divrei agada also include divrei halacha. In other words, these various aspects of the Torah are always interwoven deliberately. It was never the intention of the Hachamim Mishneh, but Talmud, to completely separate these parts of the Torah. And the Talmud, of course, we find the same. In the Mishneh also, by the way, we find the same. And there are here and there, in some Masechtot more than others, there are references to agadic material. Also in the Tosefta, which is like the secondary layer of Torah Sheba'al Peh from the time of the Tanaim. There also you find quite a lot of agadic, that is to say, philosophical, not philosophical in the necessarily Aristotelian sense of the word, but statements and perspectives which focus a person's attention on various aspects of reality, of human life, of how to live one's life as a Torah Jew. All these things are included in the term agada that the Hachamim use. So what are these things that the Rambam is referring to? This is Halacha Daled in the Machon Mamre edition. Kol ma shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamo nahlak lishlosha halakim. All things created by Hashem can be divided into three categories. Mehem beruim, shehem mahubbarim, migolam, wasura. Those things, created things that consist of a physical being, physical reality, body, and a surah. The word surah is the term used in medieval Jewish philosophy, shall we say, such as the Rambam, to denote the essence, the spiritual essence of that being. In other words, not only a human being has a surah, which we can describe as the essence of that thing which defines it and makes it what it is. Not only a human being has such an essence, but so does a cat, for example. There is something about a cat which makes it a cat. It's a difficult thing to define in either physical or chemical or even biological terms, because science has not yet, at least, observed and discovered this essence. It's not something, but perhaps we do know something about this. Certainly, we know more about these things than was known in the past. We know about DNA. We know about genes. We know about mutations in genes and in DNA. But that's not the entire picture. In the scientific realm, actually, progress has been made in this field since the 1980s. Without going into all the details, well, I will mention one scientist who has written and lectured about this. If I'm not mistaken, his name is Stephen Meyer. You may have heard of him. I think it's Meyer. He is a scientist specializing in, on the one hand, in biology and those aspects of biology which pertain to understanding the genome and DNA and everything to do with the how human and all life forms, how the cells are arranged, how the amino acids join to form cells, etc., to form a workable mechanism. And he also studied in either Oxford or Cambridge. He's from America, but he studied, he did his doctorate in Oxford and Cambridge, I don't recall, in the philosophy of science. You can look him up, and I recommend that you do. He has some interesting books. He has a book called Darwin's Doubt, and he has, I don't remember the names of all the books right now, but there's more than just that one book. There's two or three, I believe. Very interesting. And basically, he and others demonstrate the tremendous difficulties from a scientific perspective, from a purely scientific perspective, with the what we can refer to as the standard Darwinian model, an understanding of how life began at all, any form of life, and second of all, how one life form might evolve into another life form. So basically, in very simple terms, to the limited extent that I understand these things, is as follows. In order for any living organism to form, to take shape, and to function properly, so that it actually is alive, there has to be a plan. It's not enough to have DNA. It's not enough to have amino acids and other biological components. There has to be an overall plan which directs them to come together in a certain way. And that is in fact what DNA is. We know today, and this is one of the points that he makes, and others of course also, but he's the person whose name sticks in my mind. We know today that DNA is essentially information. DNA is a code which it's encoded information which directs the physical components of life to arrange themselves and to function and to produce certain things in a certain way, in a very, very specific way, a specific order, and in a very, very finely tuned fashion, so as to create a particular organism. That is what DNA is. And today the analogy is very straightforward. It's software and hardware. A computer by itself is a wonderful thing, but it's actually useless without the software. So you have all these components, you have these boxes and these drives, and you have these CPU and what have you, but without a program, it doesn't actually perform or enable you to do anything at all. And exactly the same thing is true of biological life. And this we know today. Of course, from there, the argument goes on that seeing that we understand and we can prove, and it's clear to us today that DNA is encoded information, we therefore should understand from that if we have before us encoded information, then someone encoded it. In other words, no code in the knowledge of humanity, there's no such thing as a code that was not encoded by somebody. Information does not just invent itself, and just like computer code. No one would suggest that computer code invented itself, and it's very specific. If you change the tiniest part of the computer code, then things will go wrong. And the same is true in the biological world. The tiniest change in DNA, in other words, even a small mutation, if it's a critical type of mutation, will mean that this organism will not be viable. So all of this we can include all of this information, all of this understanding that we do have today in the term the Rambam uses here, Torah, which is essentially what makes a thing that which it actually is. So what is it that caused the genetic material which makes up a cat, shall we say? What is it that caused it to form in that way and to assemble itself in that way and create this organism which we refer to as a cat? Well, that's the Torah. And we can be even more precise about what it is from a biological perspective today. And there are also aspects which we are not yet able to understand and quantify and describe precisely. But we all understand that there are certain instincts and innate abilities that various creatures, animals have. One creature can, for example, a cat can climb a tree and a dog cannot climb a tree. That's also that's entirely built in. It's not a learned behavior, and it's also instinctive. So all these things fall within they all can be included under the rubric of surah. So Rambam says, "Beruim shehem mehubarim migolem usurah, vehem nehawim unifsadim tamid." And these things are always being created, coming into existence, and also ceasing to exist. So they become alive and they also die. Kamo, and such as what? Kamo gufot ha'adam, waha'behima, waha'samahim, waha'matachov. All these things come into existence and cease to exist, whether we're speaking about human beings or other life forms or plants. These things come into existence. They didn't always exist. They come into existence. They live, function for a time, and then they cease to exist. So that's nehewim or nifsadim. Rambam also includes here matachot. Matachot literally means metals or other elements which exist on Earth, which also can cease to exist in the sense that, perhaps in the sense, for example, that uranium depletes. Right, there's a half-life, and it undergoes a certain change. It's not entirely immutable, it's unchanging. There are also other created forms of existence, which also are made up of a golem and a surah, physical form, and the everything else that includes information and the nature of that being. That's the surah. Aval enam mishtanim miguf leguf u'misurah lesurah kamo harishonim. But they do not undergo change and they do not change form or shape as the first. In other words, by a living organism made of flesh and blood, having died, eventually breaks down into different elements, different physical, chemical components, and changes form until it disappears altogether. The original form disappears. And there are those things that do not change form in this way. Ela suratan kivu'a begolmam le'olam. And their essence exists within their physical material, le'olam, always. We'enam mishtanim kamo elo. They do not change and take on different forms. And what are we referring to? Rambam says, Wahen hagalgalim wahakochavim shebahem. And this refers to I believe we discussed this in the past once. Galgalim, literally spheres or cosmic wheels that were understood to exist, and the planets and the stars that it was understood were fixed in these wheels, these revolving, moving entities which populate the heavens and turn, and thus we see the various heavenly bodies move. This, of course, was the explanation before the concept of gravity was understood. And these created forms, these heavenly bodies, are of a different order of existence from the biological forms of existence that we see here on Earth. It was understood in ancient times that the material, the physical material which from which the shall we say the planets are made up, and the stars, etc., are of a different order altogether. It's not made of the same elements as those things on Earth are made of. From what we know today, this is not true. In other words, just as there are various elements on Earth and things are made up of atoms of these various elements, the same is true on Mars also. Perhaps different elements or fewer elements or different composition, but they're also made up of atoms. In other words, from what we understand, at least today, all matter is made up of atoms and subatomic particles, and there may well be elements which exist on Earth. There are apparently elements which exist on Earth and do not exist in other places in the solar system and universe, and almost certainly there are also elements and realities which exist in other parts of the universe that do not exist on Earth. But they're not made of a completely different substance. That is how what we understand today. The Rambam is describing what was understood and accepted in his day. Rambam continues, which is Halacha Hey, or Gimel, Umehen Beruim Surah Belo Golem Kalal. There are also created beings. There are also created beings that have no physical existence or substance. Belo Golem Kalal. Excuse me. Wahem Hamalachim. Here I refer to the angels, says Rambam, or other spiritual beings. Shahamalachim enam guf udwiya. The angels are not physical beings. Ela suroth nifrodot zomizo. They are spiritual beings. They have existence, and they are separate from one another. They can be distinguished one from the other, but not by their physical existence or substance. Umahu zeh shehaneviim omerim shera'u hamalach esh u'va'al kanafayim. In that case, why do we find in the Nevi'im references to an angel being described as consisting of fire and having wings, as we find in various nevuot? Hakol b'mar'eh hanevuah v'derech hida. In other words, it's all a mashal and metaphor in order to explain things that are beyond our mundane understanding. Lomar sheno guf. In other words, if you describe something as being made of fire, what you're getting at first and foremost is that this thing is not a physical being, in the sense that forms of life on Earth are physical beings. So it's not a physical being, it has no body, sheno guf. We're not kaved, and therefore it is not heavy, it does not consist of the various substances which then we can measure as having a certain weight, whereas fire doesn't have weight, for example. Just as the Torah says explicitly with regards to Hashem, that Hashem is an all-consuming fire. We're not Esh, and we know that Hashem is not fire. Ela mashal. In other words, when the Torah describes Hashem as being an Esh Ochala, it is referring to the fact that Hashem can and does destroy those who rebel against him. Hashem has that power, just as fire can consume and destroy essentially anything. In the same way, Hashem can consume and destroy those things that rise up against him. But that is not to say that Hashem is fire. Ela mashal is all a mashal. Uchamo shene'emar oseh malacho ruhoth V'sharatho esh lohet. Another pasuk in Tehillim, Chof Daled, states that the Malachim, the angels, are compared to winds or blasts of air, and his servants, Masharatho esh lohet, burning, consuming fire. So if they are not physical in being, their being is not a physical being, how can they be distinguished one from the other? We distinguish between physical entities because of, first and foremost, because of their physical body. Therefore, it's easy to say, well, this is standing in the left-hand corner of the room. This other body is standing in the right-hand corner of the room. And that's the simplest way to discern between them, first of all, before you get into any further detail. But if there is no physical being, how do you distinguish between them? They are different in their essence, in their capabilities, in their levels. Each is on a lower level than the one above it. In other words, they are all connected in some way. And here, actually, we can see a certain similarity to what is described in various Kabbalistic writings about how reality, all reality, not just the physical reality of this world, all reality, all levels of existence are, as it were, connected by such as links in a chain. And one is, as Rambam says here, each is comes from the level above it, one above the other. And they were all brought into existence by Hashem's power, by Hashem's will. This is precisely what Kabbalah discusses also. The various Hachmei Kabbalah attempt to describe how existence came about from non-existence. In other words, yesh me'ayin, how any type of reality could have been brought into existence from a prior reality where there was no existence other than the existence of Hashem. So this basic statement, this statement can be agreed to by those who follow, shall we say, Side Gaons or the Rambams or other medieval philosophical texts and approaches to understanding such matters, and equally can be agreed to by a different school of thought, but which does have some connection, as we are explaining here. A different school of thought, a different approach known as Kabbalah. They all agree that everything came into existence because of Hashem's express will and power. This is what Shlomo referred to in Sefer Koheleth, Mechillat Koheleth, Ki Gavoah Me'al Gavoah Shomer Uvohim Alehem. In other words, this pasuk seems to be referring to a reality which consists of of connected levels of existence, or as described in Kabbalah, something like concentric circles, one emanating from each from the former. All right, halacha zayin. Well, when we mentioned a moment ago that these different spiritual beings, one lower than the level of the one above it, we're not talking about physical, this is not a description of a physical reality where one is physically beneath the other, such as one person sitting above another on the higher level, shall we say, in an amphitheater or something, where you have different rows and one row is above the other. Rather, it is as we refer to learned men. We say that so-and-so is greater than so-and-so in his wisdom, in his knowledge, in his understanding. When we say gadol, it doesn't mean big in the simple physical sense, but we have no other word to describe chokhmah. So we describe chokhmah as being a chokhmah gadola, or a chokhmah gadola yoter, greater than. Shehu lema'ala mima'latho, shalazeh, one is above the level of the other. Uchamosh omrim ba'ila shehi lema'ala min he'alul, or as we refer to the source of one thing, which is the source or the origin of existence of another thing. We refer to the one above, that which is the origin, the original, as the ilah, and which actually is a term, to a large extent it can be said to be an Arabic term. This is the term that was used by the medieval Jewish translators of various philosophical texts to describe Hashem as the Ilah, as the which is also what the Arabs state when they say La ilaha illallah, right? Ilah there refers to God. So the Ilah is the original being, which is above the alul. The alul is that which comes from the original being. So the word ilah means the original cause in Aristotelian terms and other philosophical terminologies. What is referred to as the first cause, or the primal cause, and everything else flows from that. Rambam continues. Shinui Shemot HaMalachim Al Shem Ma'alothamhu. Here the Rambam lists various terms which we find in the Tanakh to refer to Malachim, and many have questioned exactly what Rambam writes here, how he this hierarchy, how he came about this hierarchy is not entirely clear or obvious, and it's not something that can be proved, obviously. But Rambam says as follows: Shinui Shemot HaMalachim Al Shem Ma'alothamhu. Their names refer to their levels, the various spiritual levels of these beings. And therefore they are known by the following terms: Hayot HaKodesh, Wahem Lema'ala Min HaKol, they are above all others. Wa'ofanim, Wa'ala'alim, Wa'hashmalim, U'serafim, U'malachim, Wa'elohim, Uvnei Elohim, U'chrovim, U'ishim. These are all terms that we find in in the Tanakh, these terms appear in the Nevi'im, the Ikar. Rambam discusses these things in Moreh Nevuchim. And Rambam continues and says, in Halacha Taith or Zayin, Kol elu asara hashemot shenikra'u bahen hamalachim. All these terms that we just listed, al shem aser ma'alot shalahen. They are all describing, or they're all called by these names because of their various levels. Uma'ala she'en ma'ala mimena ela ma'alat ha'el baruch hu. The level, the highest of all these levels, he ma'alat ha'suroth she'nikret hayot, is that known, those spiritual beings known as hayot ha'kodesh, above whom there is only Hashem. Lefichach ne'emar b'nevuah shehem tahta kiseh, and that is why they are referred to in various nevuot as being below the throne of Hashem, because they are closest. Uma'ala asilit, he ma'alat hasura shenikret ishim, and the 10th, the lowest of these levels, of these spiritual beings or angels, is that known as ishim. Wahem ha-malachim shemedabarim im ha-nevi'im. This refers to those beings that are experienced by the Nevi'im speaking to them. When yir'im lahem b'mar'eh ha-nevu'ah, then they see and hear in their prophetic visions. Lefichach nikru ishim, and that is why they are called ishim. Shema'alatha karova mim'alat da'ath ha'adam, because their level is closer than the others to that of a human being, or the level of understanding and wisdom of a human being. And Rambam continues. This is all these beings. He uses the term surah because we're talking about spiritual and non-physical beings. They are all aware of, they are alive, that is to say, they are a real form of existence. We are excuse me. And they have a profound understanding and perception with regards to Hashem. Each according to its ability and level. But not according to the true essence of Hashem. That is what is meant here. They have various levels of perception and understanding and insight with regards to Hashem, but not at all according to Hashem's true essence, which is impossible even for them to understand. Even the highest of them is unable to grasp the true essence of Hashem. Rather, its level of understanding is finite, and Hashem is not finite, and therefore it is not possible for them to understand beyond a certain level. Aval, Yod Aleph, or the continuation of Het. Aval maseret v'yodaat yafer mima shemaseret v'yodaat surah shelemata mimena. But each level of such spiritual beings, one being higher than the other, as we explained, in other words, being of a different order of magnitude, each understands Hashem on its own level, one higher than the other. And so it is with all the various levels we discussed, down to the lowest, the 10th of those levels of spiritual beings. ומעלה עשירית גם היא יודעת הבורא דעה שאין כוח בני אדם המחוברים מגולם וצורה. In other words, even the lowest of these levels of spiritual beings knows about Hashem. דעה שאין כוח בני אדם המחוברים מגולם וצורה יכול להשיג ולדע כמותה. A level of understanding and perception which is beyond that which is possible for human beings who consist of a physical being and a spiritual being. In other words, a body and a soul. So even the greatest human being cannot understand that which is understood, which is perceived by the lowest of these levels of these spiritual beings. But none of them know Hashem. None of them can be aware of Hashem's true essence and nature and being, as only Hashem can understand. In other words, knowledge, understanding, and being and existence go hand in hand. Just as we said earlier about various life forms on Earth, various animals, each has its own level of certain abilities and also intelligence. Various animals have different levels of intelligence. That which is possible for a dolphin to understand, which is an intelligent animal compared to others, is not possible for a cat to understand. In the same way, all these beings, their essence is what defines the level of understanding. And Rambam says now in Halacha Yodbeth or Taif, Kol hanimsaim chutz min habore, all created forms of existence outside of Hashem, apart from Hashem, from the Creator, Misura Harishona, Ad Yatush Katan, from the very first and highest of these spiritual forms, and down to the lowliest form of existence on earth, such as a small mosquito, Ad Yatush Katan, Sheyeh B'tabur Haaretz, which exists here on earth. The word tabur, of course, literally refers to the center of something, such as the place of the umbilical cord in a human being, which is roughly the center of its body. But and the earth was understood to be the center of all these other heavenly bodies. So it was referred to as tabur haaretz, the center of the system. We know that it is not so today. Hakol mikoah amito nimsa'u. Everything was brought into existence by Hashem's true and incomprehensible, unknowable form of existence. From Hashem's true essence, they were all brought into being. Now that is, of course, on the one hand, a statement again that everyone, certainly all Jewish theologians would agree with, and all the different schools of thought would agree with. But exactly how that came into existence, how this happened, is what is discussed by the different approaches, as we mentioned earlier. So Mekubal will agree with this statement as a person who is unaware of or disinterested in or rejects the Kabbalah. They will all agree to this statement. Hakol mikoach amito nimsa'u. Ulefi shehu yodeh asmo umakir godlo. Ulefi farto va'amito, and seeing that he, Hashem, of course, knows and is aware of himself fully. Hu yodeh hakol. Wa'en davar ni'lam mimenu. And thus, if everything comes from him, Therefore, and he brought into existence, clearly he also knows and fully understands and perceives all those things. وَأَنْ دَفَارْ نِعْلَمْ مِمَنُ, and there is no thing that is beyond his knowledge or understanding. So Hashem is omnipotent and omniscient, and these things go together. If one thing is the source and of something else and brings it into existence, it obviously is aware of that thing's existence, understands it fully, and seeing that all of creation is from Hashem, brought into existence by Hashem. Hashem knows, understands, and also controls, therefore, all things that were all created things. And we shall stop here for today.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org. If you are inspired by Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to get involved in Torah Eretz Yisrael activities in your local area, please fill out the relevant form by going to the link which appears on the screen.